Reinforced cement concrete, or as we call it simply RCC, is the body, blood, and bones for every structure built by civil engineers. Even though we work with it all the time, we often are unaware about its mysteries and secrets. So, to reveal them, we have gathered here today. Myself, Snigdha, Assistant Professor in Civil Engineering Department of Pottisramlu Chalavadi Mallikarjunarao College of Engineering and Technology, Vijayawada. Welcome you all to this magnificent webinar on reinforced cement concrete do's and don'ts. It's a proud moment for me as the first webinar I have planned has achieved tremendous attention from all over the world. I hope this brings shine in the eyes of my teachers who are also attending this seminar today. In order to utilize most of the time, I have designed the agenda to be on the point. So without delay, let's start the webinar. Before that, let me clarify a set of rules. Number one, please keep yourself on mute during the whole webinar. Number two, please refer to the link of Google Form in WhatsApp to post your doubts. Number three, the doubts will be clarified at the end of the session. Number four, certificates will be sent via email and will be updated in WhatsApp group. As Sir Isaac Newton said, if I have seen a little further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants. The civil engineers of today and tomorrow have gathered for the guidance from one such giants, Dr. Mahadevan Pillai sir. Today's speaker, Dr. P.R. Sri Mahadevan Pillai, is now working as the director of the Ahalya Group of Academic Institutions in India and principal of the Ahalya School of Engineering and Technology. He is also holding the positions of the Dean Faculty of Engineering at the University of Calicut and Special Officer to the Government of Kerala, as well as rendering service as the member, Senate and member, Academic Council of the Cochin University of Science and Technology, and member, CR Committee of the Abjad Technological University. He has been offering his services to the civil engineering community from 1983. And even after retiring, he undertook roles of HOD and principal. He is an expert panel member of AICTE, UGC, NBA, and NAC. I am very much obliged and honored in the presence of such a personality. I request the moderator to spotlight our speaker. Respected dignitaries, guests, and students, with a will in our hearts to learn something new, let's all welcome our esteemed guest speaker for the webinar, Dr. P.R. Sri Mahadevan Pillai. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next one, please. Yes. You know that cement is a pretty old material. Cement was invented by a mason, rather a mystery, in England, Joseph Aspdin, in the mid of 19th century, 1850s, he invented it. But it didn't get much popularized, though it was there up to an extent. But later, his son, Aspdin Jr., commercialized it. But even long before this, in Stapatya Veda, which is an Upaveda, among of the four Vedas, there are four Upavedas. In Stapatya Veda, there is an exact description of how cement is to be made. But since it is in Sanskrit, people were not aware of it. So in the commercial scale, the cement was popularized in 19th century, the second half of 19th century. And the concept of concrete came after that. And the concept of reinforced concrete came by the end of the 19th century. You see in the screen that concrete was very high in its compressive strength, especially cement concrete. In India, before the cement concrete conquered our construction sector in the early 20th century, we were using mostly lime concrete, lime surki concrete, and mud as binding material. But in the beginning of the 20th century, India also advanced in this. And the basic concept of concrete is that concrete is good in compression. But concrete is very poor in tension. Based on the capacity of the cement used, the tensile strength of concrete may vary from 5 to 1 by 5 to 1 by 15 of that of compressive strength based on the materials used. So basically, concrete is a strong material for compression. We have concrete commonly used with in India we commonly use concrete from 10 to 40 Newton per millimeter square strength. But recently I have seen in Germany they have made a sample concrete of 150 Newton per millimeter square strength, so high that it is almost the strength of the erstwhile mild steel which we used to. So the concept of concrete, when it got popularized, people were concerned why concrete cannot be used in the tension side also, so that if there's a concrete block, it can use as a flexure, it can be used as a flexural member. On the compression side as well as on the tension side, this can be used. But on the tension side, there was no choice because it used to crack. Then came the suggestion by some of the good scientists that on the tension side, if you reinforce with a material which is very strong in tension, that will become a balanced material. So it can take tension as well as compression, so that the longevity of the material and the life of the material and the use of the material as a flexural member is possible. That is how the concept of a reinforcement came for concrete. And the reinforcement mostly at that time available was metals like steel and aluminum. Steel is basically a modified version of iron. Anything with impurities up to almost 1% of iron is what the steel we normally use. Very few cases the impurities strength may go beyond that based on the requirement. But normally we have got very less polluted iron or very less mixed iron which is used as the steel reinforcements. So that diagram which you are seeing that it's a deflected beam which you see at top. In the deflected beam which is shown at the top two lines, on two sides of the beam, the tension is on the top of the surface. And in the midspan, the tension is at the bottom. So the basic concept is that wherever tension is in a member, it should be reinforced with the steel. That is why you see the bottom diagram. It's a reinforcement pattern which is shown there. The reinforcement at the midspan, where the crack is at bottom, supposed to be at bottom, the reinforcement is at bottom. And this I'm telling because you will have so many people, so all of them may not be thorough with the concept of RCC design. I feel that some students also may be there. Maybe final year students and up to an extent the pre-final year students may be able to understand it. Definitely all the civil engineers can easily understand these things without me telling. Now come to the next slide. It's a quotation from Le Corbusier, the most famous architect. Though he is a French architect, he has made his most contributions to India. Whenever you go to Chandigarh, you remember his name because he is the person who planned Chandigarh. He has once mentioned, concrete is such a material that poetry can be carved out of concrete. That is why if you go to Bahai Temple in Delhi or Ashardham Temple in Delhi or the Opera House in Sydney or the Burj Khalifa Tower in UAE, you always remember that these are poetry exposed in the natural format. Then coming to the next slide, you see these are the examples of the poetries which I told. The poetry, say the highest, tallest building now available is Burj Khalifa Tower. Actually, now it is called Burj Dubai Tower because, sorry, earlier it was called as Burj Dubai Tower. Now, when it has been sold out, it's called the Burj Khalifa Tower. The Burj Khalifa Tower is 830 meters tall, nearly 1 kilometer, we can say. A new tower is coming up in Abu Dhabi, which is over 1,000 meters taller, over a kilometer taller, but it's not completed. So even now, Burj Khalifa is the tallest. Then compare with the near tall buildings. On right of that, you can see the CN Tower, Toronto, the Wills Tower, Chicago, the Taipei Tower in Taiwan, and the Petronas Tower, which is a twin tower in Malaysia. These are all near to it. So definitely from all of them, the Burj Khalifa Tower, which is known in that diagram, it is given as Burj Dubai Tower. because when this comparison was done in 2010, it was still called as the Burj Dubai Tower. So at that time, you see that building is around 830 meters tall. But on top of it, 244 meters is a single steel spire or a steel column. So the building as such is only 564. Am I right? 584. 830 minus 244. 586 meters is the building as such. Above that 244 meter is a steel spire. It's an example of a very well-designed building. Being the tallest in the world, definitely it has to be well-designed. Come to the next slide, you will get some more information on how that poetry is made out of concrete. This is the diagram of a part of it. The left side, it shows that steel spire. That steel spire, as you know, it is 244 meters tall. And you see there a man standing on the right side just to show the human scale. How many people's height that tower is. And then on the right side, you can see the foundation. The foundation of that, I don't know whether you can read it. The foundation you can see on the right side. The total weight of the structure is almost 5 lakhs tons. Just imagine 5 lakhs tons is the weight of the total structure. And that steel spire alone, which is on top of that building, it is alone around 4,000 tons roughly. So imagine the weight. And you can see the foundation which is given on the right side. And that foundation has got 1.5 meter diameter steel piles. And that steel piles, each steel pile is having 50 meter depth below the ground level. 50 meter depth itself is around, just calculate, if you give 3 meters, it's around 15-story height below the ground level. 3 point something you can take. So it's a very deep foundation, because in Gulf, the design is done by a Pakistani structural engineer who is working in the US. The most difficulty in designing this was, those who know the design of tall buildings know, when the buildings become taller compared to some, say, after 5 or 6 stories, up to 5 or 6 stories, the weight of the structure, the dead weight of the structure is the most important parameter for analysis. But when the building goes about 10 stories or so, it's not the weight which is the determining parameter. The wind and the earthquake loads are there. And just imagine a structure which is going out 830 meters. The self-weight of the structure is quite negligible compared to the wind effect. Especially in the wind effect, it's not on the windward side, it's on the leeward side, the effect is more. I'm not going to its theory. Those who have studied structural engineering will know that for a very tall building, the leeward side is very dangerous. And remember, this Burj Khalifa tower is permitted to have an amplitude of deflection almost 1.2 meters on both sides. That means if you go on top of the building, that is on the top of the spire, 8 feet you will move on both sides. That is 4 feet on both sides. 8 feet you will be moving when the wind is coming. And you may be thrown out of the spire very easily. Just imagine the structure you are standing is deflecting 8 feet immediately with very high resonance. What will happen to a person standing? That is why people are not permitted to climb up to the top of the spire. Only professionals trained in that, like the spacewalkers, there are trained people for climbing it. They are permitted. But you can enter the building. If you go there, up to some stories, I don't remember exactly, I have once climbed it, I think around 100 stories or so, they'll permit you to climb. There's a balcony there. You can just see around the Dubai city and come back. So it's a very magnificent building. Why I told this is, every civil engineer should know that such poetry can be carved out of the concrete. And it's a concrete cum steel construction. Though the spire is fully steel, all the construction, the top and bottom are full steel. The spire is steel and the pile is steel, because steel is such a good material which is equally good in compression and tension. And it's one of the best materials for construction. Obviously, they have made it rust-free steel. Now coming to the next slide. Next slide we are coming to. I'm just showing a sample of a T-beam. All civil engineers know this. I'm just showing, we have got in a T-beam, there is a web and there is a flange. The top portion is what is called a flange. Almost all the beams, most of the beams in concrete buildings are only T-beams or L-beams. Independent beams we never have. But steel cum concrete buildings may have some independent beams which are rectangular in shape, but most of them are. So this is, I just wanted to say the terms only. The flange is the top portion, the verb is the bottom portion. Most of the time, the main reinforcement will be rebar stands for reinforcement bar, which is steel bar, and stirrup stands for the connecting. Normally, it will be rectangular or circular in shape. The connecting steel. I'm going through this basics for everyone to understand. And this is how normally a beam section in reinforced concrete will look like. Come to the next slide. Some more details are shown in the next slide. This is a reinforcement detail of a beam. On the right end is shown its cross section, and on the left side is shown its longitudinal section. So this is a detailing. Showing the reinforcement in details is called a detailing. This is not with any other purpose. I just want to tell you that this is the way the reinforcement has to be detailed when you give to the contractor, because normally there are 3 people involved in the construction. The first one is the planner. Normally the planner will plan the building with dimensions. The designer, who is a structural engineer, the structural engineer will design every element in it. The beam, column, footing, slab, pier, everything the structural engineer has to design and give in this form to the contractor who has to construct it. He is the third one. Okay, so now coming to the next slide. This is just to show how we submit the structural plans to competent authorities. Now, in most of the corporations and municipalities, and in Kerala, most of the panchayats also, you have to submit for tall buildings the structural detailing along with the plan and elevation and the layout plan of the building. So this is a sample sheet. I'm not going to explain it, just to see for a beam how the reinforcement is shown, how the cross section is shown. Here 2 beams are shown. One is a continuous beam and one is a cantilever beam. This I'm not explaining because it's a sample, just to make you feel how is the detailing done. For experienced people, they know this. This is the way we have to be submitted in a big sheet. Now AutoCAD is used for detailing these things, and at the submission time, maybe such sketches around 30-40 maybe they're on a big sheet, because we can go up to A1 size in AutoCAD. Some municipalities and corporations restrict to A2 size, so they can expand and see, because they are also having the software, they can expand and see. Now coming to the next slide. This is a cross section of a standard column junction. Why I'm showing this specifically, in most of the detailing, you see at the top of the drawing, it's a cross section. At the bottom, it is a vertical section. Top, it is top view section. See, you can see here at the bottom side, there are what is called double bars and column longitudinal bars. In most of the detailing which our present day engineers do, they take this column longitudinal bars up to the bottom, and it will rest. Double bars will not be there. It will go down and it will rest on the bottom footing bars, which is theoretically a mistake and practically dangerous, because in most of the analysis, 99% of the analysis, we take the joint, the column footing joint, to be a hinged joint. We are not taking as fixed joint, because those who know the analysis will know, in any analysis method, if it is taken as a fixed joint, so many indeterminacy will be there. Number of indeterminates will be high, so analysis will be almost impossible. Now computerized analysis is there, but we will get an approximate calculation only. That is why in most of the analysis, the column footing junction is taken as a hinged junction, and if it is a hinged junction, this only can make a hinged junction. If you are taking the column longitudinal bars of the footing, it becomes a fixed or rigid joint. Actually, this was a case for study in my postgraduate thesis. What is the behavioral changes in hinged footing, hinged joints and fixed joints? There is tremendous change in the behavioral pattern. That I'm not going to explain right now here, but it is not correct. This is the correct method. That's why I have shown it here. Now coming, I'm going to explain some of the, this session hereafter will be useful for practicing engineers more than just students. And so the teachers who have got some practice and the students who want to practice something in concrete, these are made out from the mistakes which is often done in the field. Because I was a field consultant for 20 to 30 years and used to go and inspect the construction, first to give the design, then when they construct, we have to go and, because our government do permit taking up consultancy even when I was working in the college. So we used to be consultants for government and private sector. So both sides we used to go and inspect how they make the reinforcement, and we have to change. We have to tell them to change the reinforcement many times. Not only that, suppose some fracture or failure is coming in a structure, it will be reported, and we have to inspect and we have to see the reinforcement pattern, and then have to suggest remedies to them. So these are all coming from a lot of experience in the field, and maybe for a fresher to get all this experience, it may take 20-30 years. So it is better that you learn from this experience of others and correct it. Now see this figure, it's a reinforcement pattern of a cantilever. You see in the top diagram, there's a cantilever. The left side is the cantilever part, projecting part, and the right side is a supported part. So the left side reinforcement has to be very careful. Most of the people even today give the reinforcement as given on top. It is very easy to give. So you see that the crack develops there. This is not just an imagination. I have seen it many places. So the reinforcement pattern is to be given as shown on the bottom side. There you see what is a term called LD. LD is nothing but the development length. You know the development length will be given in terms of the effective depth, and IS 456 gives the equation for development length for different categories. You know that. Anyway, I'm not going to that, but the development length will approximately be 40 to 50 times the diameter of the bar, and very rarely it goes beyond that. So those equations you can take from IS 456, but you see that the bottom diagram shows how the reinforcement has to be given, and also you can see the stirrups have to be close when it comes to the joint of the cantilever with the. What is the difference between an incorrect figure and that correct figure at top is, in the incorrect figure, the same main bar is bent up and going on to the right side. In the bottom figure, you can see the bottom figure, the bar coming from the cantilever part is going inside for an extra length for splicing purpose, and another bar is given at top, and these are connected by vertical stirrups. I think you understood the mistake. What I suggest is, I have asked the organizers to record my speech along with the along with this PPT. It will be coming. That will be given to you. Since the PPT is a copyright material, PPT as such will not be given to you, but PPT along with my speech, which is recorded, will be given to you, so that you can go through it once more and try to understand what I'm telling right now. Because if I go on explaining all these sketches for a long time, it may take a lot of time. Now, one of you can just comment whether you are hearing me properly and whether the way in which I am explaining is sufficient or some change is required. Anybody can comment. You can unmute yourself and comment and then mute. Not all. Clear. I'm not hearing anyone. I think somebody has put a message. Let me see that message. Chat box, some message is there. No, it has nothing about this question what I asked. Because I'm just imagining that you are understanding everything and you are seeing everything. Just wanted to confirm. Yes, everything is going on good. Message.
Everything is going on good, sir. Everything is going on.
Because in such an online session, I have to cross check in between whether things are going on well. Otherwise, I may not know. Yes, many have replied. It's going on well. Okay, now come to the next slide. This is a non-prismatic beam. A non-prismatic beam you have seen earlier. You have seen a cantilever beam, but here instead of cantilever, it is supported all. You can see the top figure. It is supported on both the ends and it is supported on the mid also. And you can see, if again, like cantilever in the previous case, if again it's not having the reinforcement pattern as I advised earlier, it can develop crack. Structural engineers may come up with a doubt why crack can develop there, because both end supports are there. Because in most of the cases, the columns at the ends will be having less moment of inertia compared to the column at the mid, which will be stronger or stiffer. So there is every chance that the ends can subside, the ends can settle, whereas the mid column will not settle. So this is common. I have seen many places. So there also this pattern of reinforcement should be given. I think you understood that. Now coming to the next one, grid beam. Now grid beam, what is a grid beam? A grid beam is basically one beam crossing the other beam. There are so many types of grid beam. For example, equal size grid beams are very common, which we use in grid slab. To reduce the depth of the beam, we will have a grid beam style where so many beams will be spaced at 1 to 1.5 meter spacing, and that makes the grid beam pattern. In grid beam, the main beam and crossing beam will have the same dimension. So what happens is, when the one beam is crossing the other beam, the one which is slightly higher in depth we may call the main beam. Or if one beam is having more reinforcement, the other is having less reinforcement, the one having the more reinforcement we call as the main beam. The other one which is crossing it is called the sub beam, main beam and sub beam. Normally, the sub beam is done in the way it is shown on the top. You just see. But you can see that if the sub beam is done that way, after a period of time, for example, I had to go to one university in Kerala where there was a big building where all these sub beam joints have cracked. The registrar was very confused what to do. So we had to go and inspect, and I found that wherever the grid beam and sub beam is joining, it has got a crack there because students have to sit inside its classrooms. So we identified that they did this mistake which is done on the top side. That is why I suggest this correction. And many of these things which I am explaining will not be available in textbooks because textbooks only give the standard design. So you can see the figure and study it later thoroughly well, so that how it is done. See, for example, in this correct diagram at the bottom, we have given what is called hanger bars, and we have given extra bars at bottom with a slope of 1:10, and it is given for a distance of 1.5 times d, where d is the effective depth of the beam. I do take it for granted that you know what is effective depth, you know what is total depth, etc. Otherwise, for others it's not usable also, because only they can use it properly well. Now coming to the next slide. When secondary beams are less in depth, the previous case I have told that the secondary beam or the sub beams and the main beams have almost the same depth. Whereas secondary beams are having, say for example, the main beam is having 30 centimeter depth, the secondary beam is having only, the sub beam is having 20 centimeter depth. Secondary and sub are the same. In that case, you can go for such a pattern. There also, if you are going for the top pattern, cracks are likely to be there, because any beam to beam joint or any column to beam joint, as you know, is a point of weakness and a point of crack and a point of discontinuity and a point of stress concentration. All this comes because of stress concentration there. Those who have studied fracture mechanics must be knowing that the stress concentration is so many multiple times there. It can go even up to infinite stress concentration in some of the points. That is why cracks develop at all these points. Now, the correct positioning I have shown below, that is the way it is to be done. Nowhere I have mentioned the bar diameter. The bar diameter depends on what are the main bar size you are using for the beam. Say, for example, the main bar of a beam is 12 mm. These bars, the hanger bars and the additional bars, you have to provide the same diameter. Suppose you are using a stirrup of 10 mm or 8 mm, the same diameter you have to use for these stirrups also. That is why I am not explaining that dimensions correctly, because it is dependent on what size of beams you use. Come to the next slide. It's a simple beam. Nowadays, we don't bend the bars like this. You see, for example, the top, the bar, the main reinforcement is bent. You know by theory, in a beam, especially when a beam is simply supported or continuous, simply supported only with semi-rigidity it will happen. Otherwise, continuous beams or fixed beams, the reinforcement has to be more at top. I was once inspecting a site for which the engineer was my student, and the span of the beam was around 5 meters, RCC beams. I found that the reinforcement is more at the mid-span and very less at the supports. I asked that man, who is, of course, I have the liberty because he was my student. I asked the man why the reinforcement is there. And he was saying that, sir, the midspan, we need a lot of reinforcement. I said, it's wrong. You're wrong conception. In a big, long beam like this, where it is continuous, the main reinforcement, the higher concentration is supposed to be at the end span, where the columns are supporting it. And that is very necessary. So this concept has not gone to many people. Many people feel that the reinforcement has to be more at the midspan. It is wrong. In beams which are having very long span, the main reinforcement, the highest quantum of reinforcement has to be at the supports on the top side, not on the bottom side. I think you can think over it at home later and see here, when you are bending the reinforcement, whether it is, let us assume this is a fixed beam, when you are bending the reinforcement, nowadays instead of bending, you cut it and continue at top, because now bending is difficult. Now we are using either thermosteel or torch steel, for which bending is very difficult, that will break and crack. So people cut it. Cutting is easier for that, because in those steel, the carbon content is more. In mild steel, since we have got nearly 0.2% carbon content, we can easily bend it. Nowadays, bending the steel reinforcement is very difficult. So whether it is bend or bending is easy to show in the diagram. That's why I have shown it. Whether it is bending or cutting, don't do it at the same location. Wherever you want to start the bending or start the cutting, that is, normally we do it at the point of contraflexure. At that point, you reduce a bit of steel. Say, for example, you have to cut 4 bars. 2 bars you cut where you have to start cutting. And the remaining 2 bars, instead of cutting all the 4 bars there, remaining 2 bars you cut a bit more near to the support, because at that point of contraflexure, you can eliminate, of course, even beyond the point of contraflexure, you have to give some development length, that is different. But at that point, instead of cutting all the bars, you can cut stage by stage, so that the stress concentration in the concrete is not high. And remember, stress concentration in concrete is never advisable. Earlier, we used to use even M15 concrete for roof works and all. Now the IS code says it should be M20. Even M20 concrete cannot withstand such a lot of stress transformation at a single point. So better to avoid it. Now coming to the next slide. The incorrect method is given on the top and the correct method is given on the bottom. See what is the difference? Many people go by thumb rule while placing the reinforcement. You would have seen that most of the small works, even up to 3-4 stories, the beam and slab reinforcement, most of the times the column reinforcement also very dangerous. They will say that for the other building we use this much. So for this building, I've seen most of the ministries and contractors saying, we did another building there, we used like this. This building also we are giving like this. It's a foolish thing, because they have to see, when you analyze the structure, you will understand what is the difference in the pattern or behavior of the concrete and the structural member. One simple experience I had is, once I had given the design for 18 mm bar, because 16 was very less and 20 was very high. So I checked up with the shop whether 18 mm bars are available. They said it's available, and I gave the design for 18 mm bar. By the time this contractor went to purchase the bar, 18 mm was out of stock. He purchased 16 mm and substituted all the bars of 18 mm with 16 mm. When I inspected the site, he was saying that, sir, 18 was not available, only slight difference. I have put 16 mm. But it's not slight difference. The area of steel between 18 mm and 16 mm is around more than 20%. He doesn't understand it. But being a designer, I can understand it. So keep in mind, such simple adjustments are very dangerous in concrete. Now you see here, many people just assume span by 4 for the bending length. But remember, many times it will be insufficient, especially in a short range beams where the support is rigid, whether it is connected to a column for a rigid support, etc. So you have to ensure that it is minimum 1.5 D, where D is the effective depth. All these things come when the depth is more and the span is less. These are all, I know each one is an individual case. These are not general cases. So these also you keep in mind, these diagrams which are showing are not generalized case. They are specific cases for specific purpose. And now you come back to the support at mid. Mid support also, mid support normally the bending moment will be the highest at the mid support. When you analyze, you can see. And I have a request to people who are doing the analysis, by computerized software. I've used almost all software. In every software, we are getting the analysis almost correct. We can say analysis is almost 95%, 98% correct. But most of the software give you an awkward design. Design will be very dangerous if you follow the software, because software will not be having most of the code provisions. Software doesn't know the practical considerations. So from all this point of view, if there are some structural designers in the listeners group, if you are doing structural design, you can very well depend on the analysis part, whichever software you are using, whether it is STAAD or SAP or any or an advanced BIM version software, whatever it is, whichever you use, you can depend on the analysis part, but never rely on the design part. So at some stages, I used to do only analysis on the software and used to do design independently, manually. But nowadays, what we do is we do the analysis and design on software. Then design, we will check element by element and correct it. Otherwise, it will be a big blunder when we give to the client. That is to be done. Designers, please not. Now, coming to the next slide, you see that slide. It is showing where the cracks will develop. Just see that. I think now you can see some 3 red spots. These red spots will be very common to the point of contraflexion. Any experienced designer, even without calculating the bending moment diagram, can approximately say within 10% precision where the point of contraflexion will be. A beginner cannot tell that. After you analyze a lot of structures, you can know where it is. But when you are doing the analysis by software, no need for that. You will easily get the point of contraflexure, and always ensure that your reinforcement cutting is not done before the point of contraflexure, because that is a cracking point mostly. See, all these red spots are expected to be the cracking points, and you have to give the reinforcement such that the cracking point is also taken care of. It should overlap, though theoretically it is not required. It should overlap, because the code will give a provision for cutting the reinforcement. So this you can keep in mind. And of course, we are not saying that all the bars should be taken beyond the crack point. No. If there are 6 main bars, you have to cut 4. You cut only 2, keep the remaining 2 extra there so that it doesn't develop a crack there, because these cracks will develop only after some time. In the initial 1 or 2 years, the cracks will not be that much visible, because all the beams will be having a plaster cover, and this plaster cover will break only after some time. And once the plaster cover is breaking, definitely you can see the crack inside. Now coming to the next slide. This is a non-prismatic. This mistake many people I have seen doing, because people, especially without much experience in the field, do this mistake commonly because they don't understand the behavior of the structural section. And you know that many times the reinforcing is not even supervised by a qualified engineer. The bar benders and maximum the supervisors with a basic diploma or ITI are supervising the bar bending and placing session. They don't know the theory of what is point of contraflexure, how the cracks develop, what is the fracture mechanics. They don't know. So these mistakes do commonly happen, and I have witnessed it. Now see the mistake. This is self-explanatory. The diagram given on top is wrong, and the diagram given on bottom is the correct one. See, it is self-explanatory. Because bending I cannot explain by word. You can see. I think it is visible to all of you. And those who are using a mobile, you can expand on the screen itself so that you can see it big. My last webinar, somebody was asking, sir, we are seeing only small sketches. I told you, just expand. You can stretch on the screen. Now come to the next one. For a cantilever beam projecting from a column, you can see the top one. The column is on the right side. Cantilever is projecting left. in column beam connections, there is what is called a pull-out phenomena. Pull-out phenomena means this type of construction I have seen many places. The top diagram, I have seen many places where the cantilever will be hanging gradually. And why should I say other cases? When I was studying third year BTech, I designed some beams for my own home, where I was not thorough about this pull-out mechanism. And after 3 years, I have seen that cantilever beam end is coming down. So this can happen to anyone. So that is why you see the bars on the bottom diagram, where the main bars on the outer side of the column have to go deep, at least to one development length below. Even more is better, so that no pull-out occurs to this. This type of construction many times happens in small houses and all. Small cantilever just projecting out, either for a car porch or for some supporting structure. It can happen. So be careful that the textbook will not say exactly this pattern. The textbook will show that the reinforcement has to end there. That is why I'm showing it specifically. Now see the next diagram. This is a very common mistake I have seen in Kerala, because Kerala, the low-cost housing popularized by our Kerala State Nirmati Kendram and the Lorry Bucker movement, they have gone for such roofs of small span, 10 to 15. Of course, they have done the reinforcement properly, but the people who imitated, and many school buildings had to inspect for such cracks. School building may be 4 or 5 meter span. It will be a sloping roof like this, and always crack at the zenith inside part and water leaking from there. Then we couldn't change the reinforcement. So I remedied all such cases by giving a ferrocement cap on top. That is a better idea, but this can be avoided if you give the reinforcement as shown at bottom. See that reinforcement pattern? Self-explanatory. LD stands for the development length. Don't worry about minimum LD. You give a bit more than LD, because normally in such slabs, the reinforcement thickness will be, diameter will be very low. You know, most of the sloping slabs will have only 8 mm reinforcement. Even 10 mm is very rare. Okay. Now coming to the next one, where haunches are provided in beams. Haunches are provided in beam column joint where you expect more shear. You don't want the joint to crack by shear. But in most of the haunches, the tendency of the people is to give the reinforcement as on top. And that top one definitely just inside the haunch. On the haunch, it may not crack because more thickness is there. The weaker point is inside the haunch. You see the crack which is shown in red color. And the remedy for that is to give the reinforcement as shown in the bottom side. I know that many of you will have so many doubts regarding all these things, because this you take only as an introductory session. And if you have to go deep into how much should be the diameter, how much should be the spacing, etc., it has to be problem specific. It cannot be generalized. Many people do ask me specific cases. I ask them, you draw your reinforcement pattern and send to me. I'll say what is your mistake. That will be the easier method. Now go to the next slide. This shows the structural action of folded plate. You know that if you want to learn more on this, one of my professors have written a good book on folded plate, Dr. N.K. Bairagi. He has explained all the structural action with so many equations and all. Equations doesn't matter, simply that inside of the bend is a weak point for cracking. And by analysis, you can show it. So this always keep in mind. Any folded plate, whatever is the method you use for analysis, folded plate, many methods are available for analysis. Nowadays, even computerized programs are there, but whatever is the method, the steel, the analysis will give the steel uniform, but that point is a weak section where we'll have to see that both the steels are extending inside instead of bending there. They go straight, don't bend there, so that they will overlap each other to a development length. That is what I have shown in the previous sketch. Now coming to the next slide. Many people are concerned about giving the tension and compression reinforcements. Many times the shear reinforcement is ignored. Remember, in deep beams, the shear reinforcement is more important, equally important as the tensile reinforcement or compression reinforcements. And that is why if a beam is more than 1.5 feet or nearly 45 to 50 centimeter deep, more than that deep. You know, some bridge beams. I had to design a bridge recently. The beam depth is 2.5 meters. This is small. 2.5 meters means 1.5 times the height of an individual. So in such beams, the shear reinforcement is very, very important. And the spacing of the shear reinforcement is also very important. This shows only a sample, don't generalize it. This diameter and spacing are only for a particular case which I chose, but don't generalize it. It depends on the depth of the beam, but always keep in mind, any beam less than half a meter, be careful about the shear reinforcement. Otherwise, the crack pattern which develops in that will be shear cracks. You can easily identify shear crack on a beam because shear cracks will be angular, whereas tensile crack will be normally perpendicular. So it is easy to, just by seeing a crack, we can say what is the problem with the beam by experience. Okay. Now coming to the next one, a cantilever beam with point load. See the left diagram, we have given precise top reinforcement and precise bottom reinforcement. But always keep in mind, this is a heavily loaded cantilever, and this cantilever is always subjected to lateral forces whenever possible. For example, the gantry girder supporting beam is like this. I think you know the gantry girder. The gantry girder supporting cantilever beam is like this. It is always susceptible to some lateral loads also. So keep in mind, we should definitely have reinforcement. Even though you don't need theoretically reinforcement, you have to give side main reinforcement on the top half minimum. Because on the top half only you can have, it is be normally, you know, tapering. In a tapering section, you cannot have for the full depth. This is the way it is to be given. Now this is one, earlier we never used to cut the beam. In old days, we used to say, you know that below the neutral axis, the concrete is ineffective. The purpose of the concrete is only to retain the compression zone and the bottom tension reinforcement. So that place can be easily cut. But remember, that is also subjected to shear. There may not be tension or compression, but shear can be there. So while cutting such openings, normally people simply give for reinforcement on corner. This is what I have seen most of the textbooks, the top style. But it is wrong. That corners will crack. It will spoil the beam, and the beam will become weaker and weaker over the years, and that should not happen. So the correct way to give is, don't worry about the diameter, spacing, etc. But that is the way it is to be positioned. It's only a sample case. You see that. Okay. You have not shown that. Your slide is even this one. This is the slide. Not this, the next one. Okay, okay. This is a slide which I was explaining. Now go to the next slide. Now you can go to the next slide. Beam column junction. Beam column junction is an area of study done by many researchers. If you go to RCC published papers, thousands and thousands of journal papers you can see on this study. And I think at least 2-3 PhD theses I have evaluated and assessed on this subject in Anna University, the same university. So this is a very common area of research, how the beam column junction reacts to loads. And you see that left side, you see it's an incorrect method. The beam column junction, to make the junction safe from cracking and weakening, you have to give the side reinforcement also. I don't specify how much is the side reinforcement, depends on analysis. But on analysis, we can identify, normally what we do is, we assume a minimal lateral load also. Though there is no lateral load, we assume a minimal lateral load and design it. But we give a steel which is more than the design requirement so that it is safe. This is a method we do. I told in such extra steels we give, there are always a term of, approximation. Those working in the field will be knowing. Say, for example, you get 2 steel bars of 16 mm are required. You will always put 1 12 mm bar extra because we don't want to take a risk. Earlier, when we were using working stress method, the factor of safety was very high. We used to have a factor of safety of 3 for concrete and 2 for steel. But now when the limit state method has come, the factor of safety is only 1.5. So the designer has to be very careful in weaker sections, not everywhere. In weaker sections, be careful to give something extra which can take care of it. Now come to the next one. This is called column spacing. The column spacing is a common mistake everybody does. The concrete inside the steel is called the core concrete. The core concrete only takes the load. And if you are giving like the left side, what happens is the core concrete is not effective in taking the load which is transmitted by the top reinforcement. Because you just see that this reinforcement is going inside and it just punches inside. Whereas in the second case, the external reinforcement is never permitted to punch inside the core. So that load will be transferred to the core below. That is the correct position. This mistake most of the workers do unknowingly. So keep in mind, forget about the other things. It's a pattern which is more important. Forget about the spacing, forget about, and also see the splicing area. You see that the splice part, the reinforcement for shear, that is the shear stirrups should be higher there. So that in that area, in splicing area, the bulking effect is more and they have to be contained, the core has to be contained, because you know that the axial load coming from the bars, splice bars, if they have a slight tilt, it will work as a bulking load on the column, and that can be well avoided by giving closed stirrups. Another thing, next one. Suppose the column is reducing in size. You see there, this is where a lower story and a higher story. This you will have come across many not becoming that common. So future construction materials should be different. Maybe after 10 or 15 years, this reinforced, when this reinforced concrete came to India in the early 20th century. And then it became popular only in the 1950s and 60s. And of course, the households became RCC only in the 70s. So it's very recent, only 50 years we have seen this boost on this concrete used to construction. It will go away. Moreover, post-corona, post-COVID, construction technology is going to change drastically. Now people have some other concern. Instead of show off in a building, concrete has been used as a show material because it's a bulk material. Anyway, those all will change. I'm not going to a detailed session. There is another question. Another question is, sir, how can we fix the problem raised while laying foundation in the area where the water table is high? In the area where water table is high, we have many techniques which we use. One of the technique is dewatering. We make a big trench nearby, or in the same trench, we make a small trench in the corner and we just pump it out. That is one method. Another method is we use either hydrophobic cement or quick setting cement and we can do the concreting. And the third method is we will wait. That is what I advise people when the situation dries up. Instead of going for a construction in the rainy season, it is highly uneconomic. If at all there's a chance that the water table will go down, wait for that and then have the construction. These are the techniques we use. Then another question is, a textbook showing incorrect and correct reinforcement details will be useful. Such a textbook is not available. What I can do? That's why I told you take this presentation. You will have the drawings and it will have the explanation. Such a textbook I have not seen in my life so far. So I cannot advise you. All the textbooks will give the design and reinforcement. They will not go into the meticulous nature of how it is to be placed and how not to be placed. But in one or two books, I have seen some guidelines given how not to place. But very rarely. Okay. Next question is, which type of grade of steel we can use in the case of earthquake resistant design of steel structures? It's a very interesting question. The common steel which we have got in India are what is called mild steel, high yield strength steel, and thermo treated steel, TMT, thermomechanically treated steels. Mild steel is roughly having two varieties, 230 Newton per millimeter square and 250 Newton per millimeter square permissible stress. So its ultimate strength may be around 300 to 400 range, mild steel. And next one is what is called the high yield strength steel, which is normally Fe 415 range. Fe 415 means the strength will be around 415 Newton per millimeter square. That is normally HY steel. And then now we have got what is TMT, thermomechanically treated steel, and that is commonly available in 500, 550 and 600 Newton per millimeter square strength. Very rarely in India, 650 Newton per millimeter square is also available. But remember, some of the Western countries have gone up to the level of, for example, Burj Khalifa Tower, high strength material was used. They used cement of 100 Newton per millimeter square strength. The IS code gives only up to 40. So only up to 50. So even that category cement was used there. And they have gone off steel up to around 80 to 100 Newton per millimeter square. Anyway, sorry, not 80, 800 to 1000 Newton per millimeter square. So materials are available, but from the earthquake point of view, mild steel is always better. What is the reason is mild steel doesn't break immediately. Mild steel has got a long yielding time. You would have seen the stress strain diagram of mild steel. You see that once the yield point is reached, slowly it comes to the plastic range, remain in the plastic range for some time, and then only it again elongates. That is the advantage of mild steel. So from the earthquake point of view, mild steel is better, but it is highly uneconomic. Now, if you are giving mild steel instead of TMT steel, you have to use more than double the quantum of steel. So, but if you are very specifically aware about an earthquake area, and the steel utility or steel quantum required is very less, it is better to go for mild steel even now, because mild steel shows the symptoms of breaking before it breaks, and you will have a time to escape. Whereas TMT steel or HYSD steel will not give you that symptom. Maybe you are inside the building, all of a sudden the building can fall down. That is the difficulty with high strength steels which are available now. Now let us see the next question. Is it ready? PPT is ready?
Yes, sir, it is.
Yes.
Sir.
So I'll come to the questions later. Now
Okay,
let us see the PPT. Now you come to the next slide. Take the next slide. Yes, this slide you see, when a column is ending at a slab or beam, you see here that vertical member is a column and the top member can be a slab or a beam. Normally it will be beam because we don't permit column to end at a slab. If a column ends at a slab, there will be tremendous punching shear and the slab can shear. So we avoid that. So either the column has to have a haunch at the top, which we have in construction, what is called flat slab construction. There will be head or capital for the column. Otherwise, the column will be ending on a beam. And it is ending at a beam. You see how the reinforcement should be given. The top one is incorrect. The bent bar has to go for a full width. That is what is given on the bottom diagram. See that? These are all self-explanatory because I have to explain these things to even the supervisors in the field. They cannot understand the theory, but they'll understand the sketch immediately. And I think in understanding the sketch, they are better than even engineers because they are every day dealing with these sketches. That is the advantage. Now see the next slide. Somebody has asked about earthquake region. Earthquake region, all the reinforcement patterns should be modified. I'll show 2-3 slides here for earthquake region. See, the left side is giving that for a non-earthquake region, and the right side is giving for earthquake region. You see the difference? The bent bars have to go a high distance away. It depends on the region where the structure is in earth, which earthquake region it comes, and what is the size of the element. This length will be changing. That is why it is just given as a notation. That's not defined, but this is the way it is to be given. Now come to the next slide. The column details in earthquake region. In earthquake region, see, earthquake always causes shear in the member. You have to be very careful. Earthquake has got two actions. Lateral movement. You know, earthquake, P waves, S waves, etc. You have studied. Earthquake action is two types. One type is horizontal movement, which we call the lateral movement, shaking. It will just shake you like a shaker machine. And the other type of movement is a thumping movement, moving up and down. The shaking movement you can feel only if you are standing outside. This thumping movement you can feel if you are lying down somewhere. Okay, so whichever is the case, lateral shear is very possible in earthquake structure, and that is why it has again gone down. The display has again gone, I think. Okay, it will come back to this. You can come down to this. Column details in EQ regions. Okay, right. This is it. Column movements, column details in earthquake region. You see the one in ordinary places, we give the spacing of reinforcement, say at an X distance. In earthquake region, the shear reinforcement has to be closer, especially when you go towards the bottom. This is more important. Maybe both figure may look alike, but in the right one, the shear reinforcement has to be closer. That's all. Now coming down, next slide. What you have to do in continuous beams in earthquake region. See the figure? Normally for continuous beams, we give normal stirrups, we give normal shear reinforcement like this, what is given on top, and extra shear reinforcement will be given where the columns are coming. But in earthquake region, this extra shear reinforcement you have to give at the point of contraflexure also. Actually, the point of contraflexure is more important from the bending point of view. But you have to be very careful about giving extra shear reinforcement, because the point is when earthquake acts, those points which have got less strength in bending have also got a tendency to break easily. So the shear also will ultimately, because once it goes out of the normal position, shear will develop. So the shear also can have an effect there. That is why it is given like this. I'm not going to the structural theories. This is the way the reinforcement is to be given. Now you see the column the footing reinforcements. Forget about the earthquake region. That 2-3 things I just told for earthquake region. Now this is a usual thing. The left way is how people are giving footing. Most of the places, 90% of the places, the people are giving footing like this. But precise method is as in the right way. It is shown in the right side. The footing should act as a supporting, and the main reinforcement of the column should come inside the footing. This is the correct method of giving. Then only that joint can act as a hinge. Otherwise, that will be a rigid joint, and rigid joint is having infinite moment and shear components. That can be avoided. But even if it is rigid there like the left one, the joint at the soil level will act as a hinge. That is why buildings are not falling down. Though the column footing joint is rigid, the bottom level of the footing, they will act as hinge. Because the soil is, a flexible material. Those who have studied the soil surface interaction, theoretically that the soil will behave as a spring model in many cases. So it yields. That is why we are not having a footing broken from the column. But if you are doing it on a rock, it can happen. Next one. When you have to have heavy concentrated load, this comes for machine foundations. In most of the laboratories, I have seen that machine foundations do break. For machine foundation, we make a concrete block. And after some years, you see that that foundation block is cracking because it has not been properly reinforced. And I have not seen this reinforcement pattern in any textbooks. But remember, this reinforcement pattern, though not available in any RCCS textbook, they are available in some foundation engineering textbook. This type of design is shown there. That is how I got this idea also. You have not shown that? Hammer foundation? No, next one. Next one is Hammer foundation. Yes, this one. Yes. See the reinforcement pattern given at bottom. The size of bar, length, etc. I'm not saying now, because design is something we should not do a copycat on it. Design is something which you have to take case wise. For easiness and to avoid consultancy fees, people do copy designs, but that is very dangerous. Some days it may have adverse effect. Sometimes it may have more cost involved. Come to the next one. When trenching is required in a beam, Many times beams may require trenching to take some channels or to take some conduits, etc. We may need trenches in beams. If at all we have to make a trench, trench should be made where the bending moment and shear force are very less. Don't make a trench where higher shear force or bending moment is there. They should be made at positions where the structural parameters like bending moment and shear force are less there. And the top position, see the cracks that can happen. To avoid the crack, the reinforcement should be as shown in the bottom. I think you can visualize and understand that. Instead of verbally explaining, that picture explains itself. Come to the next. This is also a common mistake many places people do make. That is why at the top of the staircase and at the bottom of the staircase, you can see cracks where it joins with the landing slab. Cracks are very common because the steel reinforcement is given like this. So I think I'm talking about the first previous one. Previous one you have shown well. Previous one, yes. See this, and then we will go to the next slide. Again, another method of this is one method of giving the reinforcement. Another method is the next sketch. You can see. You see how this the reinforcement, but this is very cumbersome. Cumbersome in the sense, for every step you have to bend it like that in a spiral form. You have to bend and go. It's comparatively very difficult. Otherwise, you make, that is what it is shown there. You make stirrups and connect them each one. That is another method. In this one shows the way in which vertical stirrups and horizontal stirrups are connected to each other. And then bars will be there, which is connecting both of them. This is one method. But the previous method, of course, this is for stepping by itself when there is no slab. The previous case, it is a staircase with a waist slab. This is without a waist slab. This is a fashion nowadays to have the stair without a waist slab. This can be done one more way. Next slide, you can show the next way, how this can be done, another way. You see how it is done? Whenever somebody is making a staircase, just by how they are doing it, so that you can advise them not to do like that, because every step will have a crack in the future if it is not done in any of these methods, and people go for easy methods. And see the next slide. That is not very important for you. I have given the standard compressive strength and tensile strength and bar diameter for different bar diameters for Fe 415 steel. This you can just calculate. We take it approximately 50 instead of taking 47. We take 50 so that easy calculation is possible. 50 means multiply by 100 and take the half of it. You can easily find what is the development length for different bar diameters. Why 8 mm onwards? Because in beams we advise only from 8 mm onwards. We don't advise from 6 mm. For slabs we can go for 6 mm. But in the market there is one steel bar which is 5 mm, which is not in the IS code. IS 456 doesn't give this 5 mm. But that 5 mm bar is the mostly sold bar because it is very cheap. It is normally made from scrap steel, but I advise not to use that steel. 5 mm is not a standardized steel because it's very weak. The thinner the bar diameter becomes, the strength will become lesser based on the geometrical factors. Okay. Now coming to the next one, do's and don'ts. Of course, many of these do's and don'ts I have shown by sketches. Now I have given a list. Almost 1 hour, 20 minutes we have taken. These are so many slides are there which I have given in detail. What are the do's and don'ts while doing the concrete? Should I go explaining each one, or it can be easily read and understood? I leave it to you whether I should explain it or you will go. I'll just show this. You can show the slides one by one and then come back to this. Show all the next slides one by one. Then maybe after the discussion session, if somebody wants to that, yes, it is verbal explanation. So you can easily understand without me explaining it. Just show the next. Next. So those slides, I don't know whether you want, some of you can give an expert opinion. Maybe someone from the civil department can tell me, should I explain these slides one by one, or whether the participants can read it, because it's all text material, you can easily read and understand. What do you feel like? Somebody can comment. Either you can comment orally or you can give in the chat box whether it should be discussed or not.
I think all the points have been briefly and neatly explained in the upcoming slides, sir.
So you want me to explain or not?
No, I think there is no
Okay.
need for the explanation, as you have neatly mentioned everything here.
But I
Yes,
have got a doubt whether you will read it again, because after most of the presentations we leave it there.
Oh.
Anyway, it's up to you to decide. But time is an element, so I leave it to you, because I have to explain again some 10-20 minutes I'll take for that.
Yes,
So
if you think there
I
are some flexible or some complex points in
all are
these,
self-explanatory. These are all in symbol words. It is all self-explanatory. You can read and understand.
yes, sir.
And
Then
obviously, if you need any consultation, I think last slide has got my phone number. You can display that. You can note it, and only if it's a very genuine doubt, you can even clear it later. You
yes,
can just show that last slide, which will have my phone number. If anybody's and email ID is there, you can consult. In case, only if you are in the field, you need this consultation, because many of the engineers and supervisors do call while they are in the field doing the work. Mostly the bar benders will come and ask the doubt, then only they will be concerned about this. That's the usual thing we are doing.
I think whatever the data you have provided here is well enough for us.
Right. Now some more questions have come before closing. I'll just see. One comment is, I'll come to the comments one by one. I'll just quickly explain it. Which type of grade of steel that I have told for the earthquake. Then what type of failures occur if we are not provided proper crank length in the continuous beam. The type of failure depends on the structural combination, not on a single element. So we cannot predict whether the weakness is coming in the column or the beam or combined. So predicting what way it will collapse is difficult. And even if crack has occurred, sometimes it may not collapse because of combined mechanism. You have studied the collapse mechanism. Sometimes the combined mechanism will not collapse. It may stay back. So that is not predictable. Then next one is, you can author one such book. Let me see. I'm holding so many responsibilities now. I have authored 10 books, but early last 10 years I have not authored any book. Maybe we'll think of. I take your advice strongly. HYSD bars are thermomechanically treated steels or not? HYSD stands for high yield strength deformed bars. HYSD is not thermally, but a peculiar variety of high yield strength bar is what is called TMT, thermomechanically treated bars. So TMT bars are thermomechanically treated, not HYSD bars. They are a higher version of HYSD. Then, sir, can you please explain clearly regarding the problems raised in overlapping of steel online? That I have given in that list of explanation. Never go for overlapping steel if the diameter of the steel is very high. For example, if the diameter of the steel is more than 36 mm, never overlap. And even above 30 mm, overlapping will be very difficult. So only if the steel diameter is less than, say, 25, you go for, less than or equal to 25, go for overlapping. But nowadays, welding technology is available equally well. No need to even overlap. If you have got gas welding technique, it is strong, equally strong as well as reinforcement. But many people are having only the other welding. What is that called? Other than the gas welding, ordinary welding is they're using the welding rod. Only electric welding. Only that welding people are having. That is not good for steel reinforcements. Okay. Then another thing is, the bridges will get moving loads. Where compared to reinforced building, is there any change in reinforcement in bridges, sir? Though the bridges are getting moving loads, the deck of the bridge is not supported to take lateral force. They are supported on neoprene pads mostly. So any lateral load coming on the bridge will be counteracted by the flexibility of the supporting neoprene. Only in arch bridges and cable bridges, this lateral forces are a concern for the analysis. There, the lateral forces are also taken into consideration while analyzing. So bridges don't have any such problems. The analysis takes care of it. Then another question is, recently I watched the news A bridge in China is swinging due to wind load. Is it possible to repair the bridge? And that bridge was permitted to swing. I told the Burj Khalifa tower is permitted to deflect 4 feet on each side. The building will not collapse. If you are standing on it, you will be thrown away. Similarly, this bridge is permitted to swing. It has been tested for the resonance also. So nothing will happen to the bridge. It is tested for that. But you may be thrown away. That's the danger. Then another thing is, what is the minimum correction for reinforcement? I don't know what is the minimum correction, what is understood by that. I'm not clear what is the minimum correction required for reinforcement. Normally, we give always reinforcement a bit extra because every designer is a human being. The human erring is possible. So always we give some extra reinforcement. Say for example, if we get 50 centimeters square steel is required, we will give 55, 5 to 10% extra so that there is no risk. I think all questions are over. Any other questions? So go home and read. I think the organizers will send you the recording of this session where all the slides you have to show and record. Okay. And I think all the slides they have shown. That is why I asked you to show all the slides. So it is minimum error correction for reinforcement. There is nothing like the concept of error correction. We give always excess. When we used the working stress method some 2 decades back, the steel was always in excess. And some of the actual samples which we tested, which were given a factor of safety of 2 for steel and 3 for concrete, now we tested, we got a factor of safety of around 8. That means the design itself was excessive. But now we don't get that much strength. Now we don't get, because we are going for limit state method where the factor of safety is less. Okay. So I think with all the, you can show all the slides. I think all the slides have been shown and then recording is there, and with we can go through it and then understand all these things. Okay, is it all right? Can I finish off? We have taken almost half an hour.
Thank you very much,
extra.
Pillai sir.
Right. I
Thank
couldn't
you very
see
much,
each of
Pillai
you. It is Professor Lakshmi.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your
Okay.
time and concern.
I couldn't see all of you because I was focusing on this. And I'm very happy that I have been to your institution for the NAC accreditation purpose. Could see most of you, and my colleagues in the accreditation team were having tears in their eye when they were returning because we were all standing with candlelight. It's the first time experience we had. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pillai sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sir,
Thank you.
Anybody still have queries? If you have any queries, so please unmute and ask. If not, we'll end the session.
In slabs, thermal insulation sheets are not provided. Why, sir?
Thermal insulation sheets.
Yeah.
You mean slabs are not given thermal insulation sheets?
Yes, sir. It will be heat not transferred into the slab, sir.
That is why nowadays, above the roof slab, people do construct a dummy roof with some sheets and all, so that there is an airspace in between. Because concrete is such a material, concrete is a composite material. You cannot insert any other material into it at the top of it to reduce the heat. Moreover, any insulation should have an airspace in between. That is not advisable in a concrete. So if you have to give any thermal insulation, you can go for a dummy roof over it. That is possible. Otherwise, you can have some insulating material coated over the slab after the slab is squared. After the slab has set and hardened, you can coat silicone-based materials are now available. You can just spray over the slab. They will work as an insulation material, and they may last for 10 to 15 years. When they are going, you can put once more. That is possible. But it's not advisable to add any thermal insulation material onto the concrete. It should be sprayed over or laid over the concrete. That is possible. Such materials are available now.
Thank you, sir. You really have taught us some prominent information regarding RCC. When you said many of these topics are not in textbooks, it comes from experience. I make sure to pass on this experience to my students in the coming days. And I hope the things I learned today, I'm sure I'm going to help me in various areas. I deem it great honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks for this wonderful session, sir. I am heartfully to our Kotisramlu Chalavadi Mallikarjunrao College of Engineering and Technology and our management for keeping us supported. I would like to thank our HOD and the Faculty of Civil Engineering for organizing this webinar and took care of every requirement to make this a successful event. Let us all thank our esteemed speaker, Dr. Sri Mahadevan Pillai, sir. Sir, your words stained with knowledge are an essential trait for us in marking our milestones in future, sir. I am sure that we have learned a lot from you today and are inspired by your words. I would like to end this by thanking you all for one last time, as an event like this cannot happen over time. It requires great planning and extreme effort, which we were never short of as we were backed with support from management. I want to thank all our participants for coming forward to learn something new today. As it is said, knowledge multiples when you share it. Thanks for your support. With this, I declare the webinar has ended. I request every one of you to please provide your details for receiving your participation certificates and feedback form. Thanks for participating. Thanks to all of you. Thank you for
Thank you.
accepting.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay then. So thank you all. Bye.
Thank you so much, sir.